Greetings, everybody. My name is Brett DeHoot, and I think for the 12th time it is my absolute pleasure to be a part of Communities in Control. It is quite simply the best gig of the year every year. We're here to talk about disruption. If you think back to your scholastic era, which is for some of us close to the Jurassic era, you will remember school reports. And the word disruptive was hardly a compliment. It was very much a negative, I know from my reports. 82 to 88. Disruptive. These days, of course, to be disruptive is a compliment. You're an innovator, and we must all innovate, must we not? Or perish. We must change the way we're doing the voodoo that we do so well, allegedly. So we thought it would be wise to bring 4 disruptors up on stage to share with us their experience and, of course, take your questions. And we're not leaving questions Q&A till the end. We're taking your questions, your comments and your challenges to my authority from the get-go. So raise your hand and we'll get a microphone to you. So, I mean, disruption, it's one of those terms that 10 years ago wasn't used. Now it's, de rigueur to use it. You're all part of it, whether you know it or not. Anyone here use email? Of course everyone uses email. Well, you've disrupted the letter game. It has been months since I sent my last aerogram. If you are using a car, Henry Ford disrupted the horse game with his car. And I think he famously said, if I'd listened to what the people wanted, I would have made a faster horse. Instead, he disrupted the horse industry with his cars. And are there any women in the room? Any women who work outside the home? You are disrupting the patriarchy. Shame on you. So, disruption is all around. It does seem to be more widespread and passionate than ever. So let me introduce our 4 panellists in no particular order at all. Jo Lim joins us. Jo, make yourself known.
Hello.
Oh, yes, why not? Though some might say she's done absolutely bugger all so far, but it's fine. I mean, I'm working here like Sammy freaking Davis Jr., I get nothing. Fine. Jo has been with ALICIA since 2001. That's a long term in office. What does ALICIA do? They protect domain names, do they not? And if your website ends with a .au, Jo is securing it even as we speak. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, but for domain names instead of gold in Fort Knox. Before then, worked in government policy, communications and IT issues, a stint as a ministerial advisor. Also a member of the task force which helped draft the Telecommunications Act 1997. That is my favourite act of parliament. Oh my God! I'm crazy for it, Jo. I don't mind telling you, especially Section 78 about customer cabling and customer equipment, boundary of the telecommunications network. Oh my God.
Yep, that was a good
We'll
one.
talk later.
Yeah, okay.
We'll talk later.
Yep.
Woo! That was worth it, wasn't it, doing that bit? Yeah, okay. Alan Crabbe joins us. Alan, make yourself known, sir. Alan, you were here yesterday, weren't you?
Yes, I was.
Who else was here yesterday, true believers? I don't know what the hell the rest of you were doing, but some of us were here in this natural, lightless room learning stuff. The rest of you, God knows where, alleyways and artisanal bars. But Alan was presenting, as so he should, about crowdfunding. Who here has attempted a crowdfunding exercise? Who's sought funding? Who has contributed funds to someone else's project? What a generous lot you are. Well, Alan is the co-founder of Australia's leading crowdfunding platform, Pozible, which is spelt with 1 Z instead of 2 S's, but I'll forgive. Now, I checked out Pozible last night, and here is just a snapshot of what's been funded, even as we speak, by members of the community. There was a big roo count. Someone 10 years ago had taken essentially a census of our kangaroos and wants to do it again 10 years later. Had found almost $13,000 out of $15,000. There was someone who wanted to create a smartwatch, and the gimmick was this smartwatch looks just like a normal watch. Well, we have something for that. It's called a normal watch. But anyway, they'd got $11,000. What do I know? And this is remarkable. This is modernity in one crowdfunding application. Nath wants $2,800 to complete his top surgery to help him transition from female to male, and is looking for $2,800 to essentially reconfigure his torso so he can live life as a man. Talk about range. Well, that's all that's happening on Pozible. Alan, did you realise that when you co-founded this organisation?
Probably not. Yeah.
Probably not, no. ALICIA DARVALL joins us. ALICIA, make yourself known, please. Oh, yes, applause all round, yes. Big fat love in. That's the community sector. Right. 15 years in the community sector. Held senior roles with Moonlight Cinema, which is a hotbed of hipsterism where people watch movies outdoors. The Melbourne Fringe Festival, where a lot of people do one-man shows to audiences of a similar magnitude, and the Melbourne Fashion Festival. But she is now the Executive Director of B Lab in Australia and New Zealand. And I know what my first question will be to you. What the hell is a B Corporation? But they are so cool, so hip, and so of such high ethical standing, ALICIA. I look forward to that. And Anna Robinson, my goodness me, Director of Business Development for Change.org, who here has established a Change.org online petition. I thought there might be. Who has signed a Change.org petition? Oh, you troublemaking activists, you. That makes Anna very happy, doesn't it, Anna? You're feeling the love. Good for you. About 2.5 million Australians have signed a Change.org petition. It's considered one of the largest platforms for social change. About 80 million people around the globe do it. And Anna helps drive this ever forward. Please once again welcome our 4 panellists. Oh, in no particular order, Anna, Change.org. Yes. Getting people to respond to more emails with more demands, sign this, forward it on to your friend, share it on Facebook or Twitter. Is this just clicktivism?
Thank you. Normally I get a little bit of a warm-up question before someone throws
no, I don't
one
do
out.
that.
Yeah, no, I gathered that.
Not at my rates.
Well... Well, I guess that's quite a common challenge that we get, but I would say no, absolutely not. In fact, I'm incredibly fortunate because every single day I get to see exactly what people are able to achieve online. And I think one of the most amazing things is that we actually see these campaigns go on to win and win at an incredible rate. So on average, one Change.org petition wins every single hour globally. And even, in fact, this morning in Australia, we've had 2 petitions go to victory before I even came here to speak this afternoon. So it absolutely does work. And I think the reason it works is because it's empowering everyday people to take action and make the change that they want to see in the world. And, like you said, it's actually 2.8 million Australians now, which is incredibly exciting. And those 2.8 million people have achieved some incredible things. And what I'd like to talk about a little bit, if you don't mind, is just one example of some of that change. So we had an amazing woman, Kerry, who earlier in the year started a campaign. And Kerry's son had been suffering from depression since he was a teenager. And that had really escalated last year. It got to the point where she actually found him one day and he had a huge number of injuries inflicted from self-harm. And she rushed him to the hospital in Queensland, and the hospital staff said, here's some Valium, go home and get a good night's sleep, go and visit your doctor in a couple of weeks, despite him clearly being a risk of suicide. Now, Kerry's not an activist, she's just an average mum. But unfortunately, her son committed suicide 11 days later. And Kerry, rather than sitting back and letting her grief swallow her up, made the decision that she didn't want that to happen to anyone else's son. So she started a campaign on Change.org in January requesting that the Queensland Health Department require all emergency services staff to go through suicide awareness and prevention training. She got 65,000 signatures, hopefully from some people in this room as well, and was featured on the 7:30 report, was invited to a meeting with the Minister for Health, and her campaign won. And what's more, not only did her campaign win, but she was actually invited to participate in the mental health review up in Queensland that the government's undertaking to reform mental health services. So to say that it's just clicktivism, I think, is a little bit unfair. I think women like Kerry and the 20,000 other people that start petitions every single month on Change.org and the 18 million people who sign those petitions every single month would definitely disagree with you. But thanks for getting that one out of the way nice and early.
It's my role as a high-paid MC to hypothetically propose these things. Actually, I am a great believer in collectivism because you can point to many victories. I mean, how many victories did you say you get an hour?
1 an hour at the moment, and growing all the time.
Yep, I think every Minister for Agriculture has realised the power of collectivism in relation to animals. You know, not many of us get to stop billion-dollar industries, whether that be live animal export or puppy farming, which is a multi-million-dollar industry and so on and so forth, or at least put a spanner in their works. And it's primarily through people activating and clicking, and probably not taking to the streets or donating their hard-earned dollars. But it does have a big, fat impact.
Oh, and particularly when it's coupled with all of those other things that you're talking about. So this isn't to say that activism online on its own is going to change the world, but that combined with all of those other types of action, whether it's donating on Pozible to a crowdfunding campaign and working with amazing organisations, does have a transformative capability that I don't think we've ever seen before.
Alicia, let's talk about B corporations, please. They seem to be a very new and progressive sort of way to structure a business and a way to accredit a certain business as being of a certain style and substance. We've seen Senator Cory Bernardi, I'm sure he has many fans in the room here, talk about halal as being potentially a way to fund terrorism in the Middle East. Is B certification funding unpasteurised milk smugglers as they deliver it to Steiner School? Just what are you really? Had to lay a lot of pipe for that, but I think we got there in the end.
Yeah, right. Wow, there's a long bow. So B corporations are businesses primarily with a social and environmental mission. So to be a B corporation, you need to be a for-profit business, and they hold themselves to a higher degree of transparency around their governance, employees, community and environmental activities. And so to become a B corporation, you do an online certification, which is managed by B Lab, and I work for B Lab, the not-for-profit that looks after B Corps. And that online certification, we like to say, is rigorous rather than difficult. But given there are a few B corporations in the room, I won't hide from the fact that it's quite an undertaking to certify as a B Corp.
As it should be, of course.
Absolutely. I don't know that there are a lot of people who are
smuggling unpasteurised milk to Steiner School?
It's not. It wouldn't be against the ethics of a B corporation. We do have a very clear ethics guidelines that you need to tick the box before you go on to certify. So a disclosure statement. So if you were doing a little uranium mining out in the backyard, you would have to tick our disclosure box, and you would automatically be sent to our Independent Standards Advisory Committee to review whether or not that was actually a suitable approach for your business.
You've got a process for everything.
There's lots of process.
Our community in and of itself is a B corporation.
Indeed.
What's so special about them?
What's so special about our community? They have an extraordinary social mission to look after the not-for-profit sector, and they want to be able to articulate that they are doing that transparently, and that they do it whilst also managing their relationship with their employees, that they run a clean office with good power supply. I'm sure you must have green power, Dennis. That's right. And that you are third-party endorsed, really, to say that you are actually walking the talk and not just greenwashing.
Thank you. Because that is always the fear, isn't it, that someone has essentially done an online survey, handed over a cheque and got a bit of a logo they can use on all their written materials, but you're far deeper than that.
We are. You are audited. We do a random audit. The auditors,
Whoa!
yes,
You knock on doors?
We do. The auditors are coming in August. Yep.
Wow.
Yep.
Did you guys realise that? Better get that windmill circulating on top of your green power. Yeah, right. Alan, Pozible, I think most of us, if not all of us here, are familiar with the concept. How well has the Australian non-profit and community sector taken to the opportunity that crowdfunding offers them? I'll get you nice and close.
Yep. So generally, we started out as a platform for the creative industries. So I suppose in some ways over the last few years, like we've been operating now for 5 years in Australia, and generally it was open for anyone to use. But generally, you would have to use it in a creative sense, as in provide something of a creative outcome with a campaign. Since then, we've slowly opened up just to ensure that people get to understand how crowdfunding and specifically reward-based crowdfunding operates. So generally, over the last 5 years, first 2 years, I think only a few organizations were really picking up on the concept of crowdfunding and using it in the way that I suppose that we started out in the creative industries allowing. So, but generally over probably the last year or 18 months, we're seeing a lot more uptake actually of using crowdfunding, and especially organizations looking to, I suppose, activate their own communities or their own following, and hopefully empowering people to actually look about using crowdfunding for individual projects, for specific campaigns that they might be working on. So,
what works well? Because last night I was looking through and I saw everything from people who, frankly, just were pursuing their own career. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but a young person who wants to film a TV pilot to add to her empire of a digital online magazine. And I thought, it takes a certain chutzpah to ask random strangers to fund your TV ambitions. What works well, what doesn't? What observations have you got?
Generally, I think it's about how you articulate yourself, like, and the passion for your project. Generally, a big success factor is being able to pitch yourself through video. Generally, we see that people are raising probably 4 or 5 times more with a pitch video than one without. So I think it's generally being able to engage people outside of your own networks, like out of your own friends, your family, and even your own social media. So it's about breaking down that barrier and actually being able to connect with people outside of that, outside of them networks. And generally, we see that video is probably the most effective way of doing this. So generally, if you're personal, if you come across as authentic, you're showing your passion for the project, generally it does come through, and people do tend to warm to you as a person, as much as even the project that you're trying to do. So.
Surely Who Gives a Crap has to be one of the best examples. Is that possible?
There's a lady with a hand in the air. We'll get a microphone to you. Whilst we talk about Who Gives a Crap, are you familiar with that brand?
Yeah.
Paper de toilette, yeah.
It's slightly unfortunate that it wasn't on Pozible, but anyway.
Oh, wasn't it? Oh, I'm sorry. I knew.
But
I had avoided it up till this point.
It was a very
Then
good
ALICIA
campaign, though.
stepped in.
Yeah.
Tell us about it anyway.
Yeah, well, I know Simon actually. He's run campaigns on Pozible since then, but he was actually one of the, I suppose, the leading people in Australia actually into crowdfunding for not-for-profits, and yeah,
it's a for-profit.
It was definitely very unique in his selling of his
Tell them what
company.
he did. Tell him where he sat.
Well, I don't know the full details of this because I wasn't really that involved with it. But
No, because it was the enemy's project, wasn't it?
It was, yeah.
Oh, sorry.
I should know it inside out, yeah.
Well, you were talking about the power of video in the appeal. You know, if you set up a crowdfunding source, you've got to convince people. You might use words and pictures. If I'm not mistaken, he took on a personal challenge of sitting on a toilet for something like 56 hours continuously, and his threat was that he'll sit and stay on the toilet until his crowdfunding target had been reached, and thank God it was reached. But I think he described it as the 56 worst, most horrifying, terrifying hours of his life. It was something like that. It was an incredible amount of time.
Yeah.
And that's the answer to everyone's problems. If you threaten to sit on toilet seats, you're home and hosed. Madam.
Well, it would be awesome if the hundreds of thousands of people that have registered are all browsing and looking to support multiple projects every day, but unfortunately it's not the case, actually. So generally, when it comes to crowdfunding, it really starts from your own networks, generally, to get things off the ground. And hopefully using that network to actually spread the word through their networks, through the likes of social media. So social media has a big play in crowdfunding. Like, if I go back to when we first launched Pozible back in 2010, there was 3 key trends at that time. One was the exponential growth of online video, so people consuming the likes of YouTube and Vimeo and the likes. The second one was the social media, so it was really coming of age in the sense that Facebook and Twitter had probably combined about 1 million or 1 billion people actually on these networks. And the third one is the payment innovation. But the key ones around social media, being able to have people share and distribute, I suppose, that message across huge networks. So generally, it starts off with every viral campaign has to start from somewhere. So it usually starts from a group of people, whether it's the team involved, whether it's the organisation behind it, or even just the family and friends of the people that start a campaign. So generally, it's no different to any viral campaign. And generally, if you want to create real buzz, you need some key ingredients, for a campaign. And if you're here yesterday, you hopefully find out all the ingredients. Yeah. So.
Where were you? At the art gallery, seeking cultural fulfilment rather than money. Lady, that's where you've gone wrong. Joe, I want to get you in on this, but we'll take the question from the floor. Sir. I'll throw that to all four of our panellists. Anyone dare to take a grab at it? I know nothing about that, but just watch me. I'll give you 3 minutes like you wouldn't believe. Joe?
Well, I can say that from where we sit, so I work for the Domain Name Regulator, as Brett said, so we're responsible for the management of .au domain names, and we're approaching sort of 3 million .au domain names registered now, and that's across com.au, org.au, gov.au, edu.au and so on. But clearly that doesn't reflect the number of Australians who are actually using the internet. And so our challenge is certainly trying to persuade Australians, particularly small to medium businesses, of the need to establish an online presence for themselves. So we find that a lot of small businesses, for example, will use eBay or they'll have a Facebook page, but they don't understand the need to establish their own online identity that is identifiably them. So that's certainly a challenge that we have, and I think that sort of ties in with this idea of how do you get people to use technologies or to do something that perhaps they're not so familiar with. I don't know if you guys feel the same way about that need to break that barrier of the unfamiliar to start with.
Yeah, I mean, the work that I do specifically with Change.org is focused on supporting organisations to leverage digital effectively, and predominantly with non-profits, but also with, political parties and trade unions. And there's definitely some challenges with uptake, and the way I see it, there's a couple of key challenges. I think the first one's really this cultural thing that Joe was alluding to, which is, I think, partly about not thinking it's effective or as effective as traditional forms of creating social change. And then I think the other one is around investment and resources. So what I see happen quite a lot is people think digital's really easy. It's kind of going back to what we were talking about with Pozible, which is, people don't just come and give you money. You still need to put some effort into it. It's just a platform. It's just a technology. So what tends to happen is people will try and do something digital, but they won't actually invest in it properly. And then, unsurprisingly, it fails. And then the conclusion that they reach is not that they haven't done it well, but actually that digital doesn't work or it's not effective. So I think it's partly about changing the culture of the organisation. I think it's partly about actually investing the time and energy and doing it effectively. And I think the other kind of key thing that's tied into that is acknowledging what the things are about digital technology that is different and making sure that you're actually using it in a way that actually is using the full capability of that technology. So the worst possible thing you can do with, say, a Facebook feed is just use it as a means to just throw information out at your supporters. I mean, that's just another channel exactly like every other channel that you've already got. It's infinitely more powerful if you use it in the way that it was intended, which is about creating dialogue with your supporters. It's going to be so much more successful. So invest your time in it, and from a cultural perspective, you really need to get over this barrier that digital doesn't work.
Who here has a state of mind that sort of says digital doesn't work, or digital is not for us, or digital is intimidating and we don't know how to quite take our first step, whether it be crowdfunding or a change.org or a new website? I mean, the internet is not just a phase we're going through, it's going to be here for a while. We've got to get to grips with it. Is that a comment you have or a response to my question? A comment? Both. Excellent. Well, we'll hand you over the microphone. Madam. There's a hand up from a lady at the front table, and I think she has a violent disagreement to that fact.
Can I just say that actually one of the most interesting trends on change.org is the vast majority of our users are actually aged 50 or older. So more than 64% of those 2.8 million people are people just like you. So I think it's a bit of a myth that it's all a young person's game.
I also just want to move quickly away from the young person debate, though young versus old. I think there's an interest aptitude element, but what I have found with new ideas and sowing seeds for new ideas in companies, that it's often about finding the entrepreneur. So there's one person who believes in the desire for change, whatever that change might be, and I feel a big part of our role is to support them to create change. And so it doesn't necessarily need to be anyone at any senior level, and I think that's what's so exciting about disruption, is that it can empower people throughout an organisation. Most recently, one of our new B corporations is a company called Sladen Legal Group, and they have a young senior associate or a senior associate who heard a B Corp speak and decided that was the kind of organisation she wanted to work for. So she lobbied her managing partner and the senior partners, and they spent a year increasing their score and building up their impact throughout their business so they could become a B Corp. And it's become this huge story through the business about the ability for all levels and all parts of the organisation to create change and not just be led from the top. So I think it has some really exciting possibilities, and it's about supporting all comers, really.
Excellent. Madam? And it is a teach-it-yourself domain, largely. There was an era that everything we know was formally taught to us as a child, and that's the knowledge we took into the world. But social media is absolutely remarkable for many reasons, but the whole digital revolution has been largely self-taught. You know, very few people receive formal training in social media or how to use email, and I do remember a time where I didn't know how to do any of that. Joe, I want you in on this because there are people in this room who can't find it in themselves to take that first step. Even something as fundamental as their own website. Thus, they go onto Facebook because it's simple and cheap, and you don't have to talk to third parties, you don't have to get any funding, you might not even have to get permission. Your organisation does offer an opportunity to community groups, does it not?
So one of the community programs that we run is around community geographic domain names. So these are domain names that, as the name suggests, are geographic. So, for example, apollobay.vic.au. And that domain name belongs to a community group in Apollo Bay. They've set up a community website. Our organisation facilitates that process. We have around 250 of them around Australia. And it's a really great way for community groups, particularly volunteers within those community groups, and we see sort of older people through those groups, learning how to set up a website or establish an online presence in a non-threatening way. So it's a not-for-profit community-run website as opposed to starting a business online, which is, can be quite intimidating or risky for people to do. So we find that's a really great way to build skills within a community. People participate on those community websites, and then hopefully that empowers them to say, oh, well, I could register my own domain name, set up my own website, set up my own business. We do find, though, that in the contact we have with our office, people will ring us up, they want to register a domain name, but more often they also want information on how to even start in setting up a business. So it's not even necessarily how to set up a website or how to register a domain name. It's, well, how do I do this whole business thing anyway? And then online seems to be an extra twist on that. So there seems to be a real sort of lack of information out there for people who just want to set up a business and do it sort of reasonably easily and cheaply, because when you're starting a new concept, you don't necessarily want to invest a lot of money in the digital technology before you know whether it's something you want to pursue. So we find that's a real gap in the market, and I don't know how that plays out in the not-for-profit sector. I presume it's the same thing, that people who have a great idea to run some kind of not-for-profit venture are also struggling to understand how they even start that.
Alicia, a question for you. When you look at your B corporations, progressive, intelligent, transparent, ethical, what do they have to teach non-profit and community groups?
Mostly like non-profit and community groups, they're driven by very entrepreneurial people who've got a strong desire for change. I think what they have to, I don't know so much teach, but what sets them apart is their business models and their ability to create a really strong product or service. So a business is only is only as good as its product or service. So no matter how strong the social or environmental mission is, if you're 25% more expensive than your competitor, you're still not necessarily going to succeed. So I wish it was a situation that everyone in Australia bought with a conscious lens and they were really clear on making ethical decisions in their purchasing in goods and services. But I think the reality is people are still buying based on value, and then the social and ethical mission is a value add.
And plain convenience, whatever is on the shelf in front of us at the right time in the right place.
Sure, but all things being equal, they do choose the product that's strong.
But they never are equal, are they? That's
no,
you know?
I don't know. I mean, yeah, I
because in theory, when we do those surveys, we're always ethical in our consumption patterns.
Yeah.
And then we buy some T-shirt from China.
That's right. And I think the other thing you can be really mindful of is how you're investing. So who are you banking with? What are their... Anyway, what are their decisions around how they invest your money? Where's your superannuation and how's that being invested? And also, I think there's a real sense of supporting local, and all these things as a consumer and an investor are things that are something that you can create change on a daily basis.
Alicia, am I correct in remembering that you ask organisations or companies that are applying, my word not yours, for B Corporation certification, you ask them to compare the income of the lowest paid worker to the highest paid worker? That's an interesting metric. Would you like to do that for your organisations, perhaps? Why do you do that?
So a lot of what we believe that B corporations or businesses need to look after both their stakeholders and their shareholders. And so we've provided, I guess, like a framework for how you might do that. And there are about 200 questions that help you work out what your impact is. And one of those questions is, what's the ratio between your highest paid worker and your lowest paid? The other questions are like, where do you buy from? How do you procure from your supply chain? Is it within 10 kilometres? Do you buy from social enterprise and not-for-profits? Do you support women-owned businesses? Do you have an advisory panel? Is there a cross-section of demographics on your advisory panel? So we really want to make these businesses both robust and incredibly accountable to their communities.
Are there opportunities for social enterprises that some of us might be involved in to become B corporations? Is this possible?
Yeah, I mean, I think the role of the B corporation is that third-party endorsement and around the transparency, and not-for-profits are held to account through the auditing process and the requirement to do annual reports. But if you're a privately owned business, there is no way that you're held to account beyond to your own shareholders. So this is a way of a social enterprise, particularly a for-profit social enterprise, to provide that transparency and again show that they have nothing to hide and that they are meeting their mission.
Anna and Alan, I have a question for both of you. Is there a risk that one person with just the right cause and enough friends who are going to forward on the link might give one issue undue prominence? Alan, is there a risk that one donation might go to the person who's making a short film or funding their album or wanting to, I don't know, start up a cafe, where potentially it could be given to something more worthy? And I know that's a loaded word.
Yeah, I think there's two dimensions to that. I think the undue thing is something I would question. I think if a large number of people are going to support a campaign then of their own choosing, then it's quite questionable to me that we make those kinds of value judgments. I mean, that's what democracy is about. I think, the thing that's been incredibly empowering and challenging at the same time about working at change.org is we actually don't control the content on the platform. We are just a platform that everyday people can use, and that means we get a whole range of campaigns started, some of which we might personally agree with and some of which we don't.
Do you ever censor campaigns? Because I have seen some that caused me some concern.
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll take anything down that actually violates our community guidelines, which includes things like discriminations, incitement of violence and so forth. But other than that, we are very much committed to being an open platform. And like I said, personally, that can be quite challenging sometimes, but actually what's really important for us is that that everyone is empowered to put their message out there and have that tested in the court of public opinion. So, if 100,000 people sign a campaign, then that's fantastic. It means that there is widespread public support for that. And generally, I'm quite happy to report that most of the time the campaigns I like tend to be the ones that get the most public support, which is a nice thing too. Yeah.
Likewise, we're a very open platform, and we don't like to prejudice any project on the platform. And even when it comes to curating it, we actually curated earlier on in this I suppose the startup phase for crowdfunding and Pozible in Australia. But generally, we don't have any algorithms that select or create projects that people should think about supporting. In a sense, that if it attracts attention or actually creates buzz, it generally is open to anyone to support. So we don't, again, we're completely open, and we're not anything specific to any one cause or campaign. So,
questions from the floor. We've got several people lined up. Madam.
No, there is, we measure your impact business model. So, for example, one of the B Corps is this legal firm that I was talking about. That's an 80-point B Corp. So every B Corp is ranked out of 200 points, and those with a profit-driven social mission. So there's one called Three Sisters in Cairns. It scores really highly. It's got 153 points out of 200. So not all B Corps are equal. So you can be running a social business, or you can be running a social enterprise, and we all have our own definitions for those. But so the short answer is you get more points if you have a distribution of wealth to your mission.
Please.
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting question. It was something that we had to grapple with a lot. So, and we explicitly made a decision to be an open platform, and it was not a decision that we took lightly, and it was talked about for a long time before we made the commitment to doing that, because we knew that there would be these kinds of challenges. But ultimately, the reason we landed on that decision is we thought it was infinitely more powerful to be bringing everyone everywhere, and that's ultimately what we aim to do, online, to be having these debates and having their views challenged, than potentially having them fragmented off and not aired in the court of public opinion.
And what's an example of something you disallowed due to your community guidelines?
We've had some fairly strong anti-LGBT campaigns in the US that we've taken offline when those have threatened violence or have crossed the line into, we take quite a broad definition of hate speech, but once they cross that line, we take them down.
But if I said that religious education shouldn't acknowledge homosexuality or should teach that it's against the Bible, would that be okay?
That would be okay. But the question would be, would anyone actually support it? And
of course, you would see good ideas that don't get any support, and you would see ideas that you disagree with that get lots of support, because there is the merit of the actual campaign, and then there's the ability of the people to drive that petition. And they are separate, are they not? Because there might be great people here seeking funding or signatures who just haven't got that email database, that can't get the media coverage, that don't have a big network, their people aren't as online as others. So that's the nature of this game.
Yeah, that's true. And it's one of the reasons why in 18 of the countries that we have users in, which is every country in the world, we've invested in campaigns and communications teams who actually work with petition starters to help them get access to really good skills around how do you escalate a campaign, how do you mobilise people, how do you get media coverage. And that's something that we've been scaling out to try and make sure that reaches every single petition starter we have. So I agree, it's a capacity issue as well. So the petition platform is one part of that. Building people's capacity to take advantage of that is a second part of that.
Yeah, I completely agree, Steve. So, a lot of the time we spend actually with campaigners is around educating people on how to pitch themselves in a way that you actually will get an emotional reaction, or at least somebody making a remark or making a comment. Because generally, if people actually have that will react, they will actually voice their opinion and actually take an action as well. So from a funding perspective, it's actually taken probably a step further than even just a signature or a click to say I agree with it. So from our degree, we do have to spend that extra time in explaining the key, I suppose, attributes of a campaign that actually contributes to funding. So it actually means you get a pledge or a payment in return for that campaign. So and likewise, we see for every campaign that has one viewpoint, we see another one that wants to do the opposite. And generally, you can see what one has more public support than the other. Generally, so
it's fascinating. I mean, we had Christopher Pine, start a petition protesting against ABC cuts in his own electorate last year, and that was a challenging. I mean, these are the kind of challenging moments.
Christopher.
So,
God, that's gold, isn't it?
Yeah,
he started a petition.
Christopher Pine
against cuts to ABC funding, despite it being the policy of his government.
Correct.
And did he get spanked for that?
He
and
did
he enjoy it?
indeed.
Madam. I think we best explain that crowdfunding, and forgive me if you already all know this, but you donate $50, hey, I'll give you a signed picture for me when I release my album. If you give me $100, I'll give you the signed picture and a CD. For $500, I'll give you the signed picture, the CD, and you can come to an exclusive live gig when I look. So there are rewards based on various levels of donation, and that, I think, might be what you were getting to. Though it sounded like a form of prostitution. But I don't know. I mean, didn't Tony Abbott, buy some opportunity to go surfing with Tony Abbott as some fundraiser? I don't know if it's that bad, but Alan knows all.
Yeah, well, I think I can sort of see where the suggestion was going, and it's probably around the way of providing an experience and providing people a way to get more involved in what you do, if that makes sense. So providing that experience as opposed to the tangibles of what's traditionally provided in reward or incentivized within fundraising. But yeah, I completely agree that some of the suggestions was not appropriate, for this campaign. But generally, I think when it comes to ethical, it's really on the person that's running the project. Any advice that's given, I think, or advice that any of the platforms that provide is usually as an example of how it can be used, or some examples of how people can incentivize. But generally, you need to understand yourselves, and generally with our screening as well, we're actually one of the most, I suppose, we're most careful with the likes of ensuring that the projects that do go up actually do follow our guidelines as a platform, and actually are not, we're not questioning them ourselves as a team behind it. A lot of platforms just allow these things to go up, and it's only through the public actually reporting it that people actually become aware of it. So from our point of view, we do take that extra step of actually screening and ensuring that projects that do seem that I suppose are unethical or even just downright illegal, they don't get up on our platform.
But that might be a good example of one campaign struck a wrong note, and that we've got to put that into perspective against all the campaigns that strike the right note. And it may have been inspired by some research you may have heard about, how campaigners were able to turn around American voters' opinion on gay marriage through a short interaction between a gay person and someone who was anti-gay marriage. That was a pretty well-reported social study, which has subsequently last week been found to be falsified. You can't change a bigot. I've said that many times before. Madam. And now we've got too many questions, so please be Get your hands up, get your questions in, and short, brief, concise responses. Madam.
It's a very good question. I think mobile technology is very quickly changing that. So for us, like countries like India, where access to internet through, in a kind of desktop format is quite challenging, most of the population have mobile phones. So I think for us, that we're seeing investing in mobile technology and mobile apps is becoming increasingly important. But it's changing. I mean, 90% of Australians have internet access now.
I'm going to be brief on that response. Madam in green, your question, please. What an excellent question.
It is a very excellent question. Well, they tend to listen to us a lot. We don't have much trouble getting meetings with most of the ministers now, which is, a good place to be in. So I think, politicians are concerned about winning elections, and if a large number of constituents are indicating that they're unhappy with something, then they're bound to listen. And I think that's where petitions are really powerful. They've been around for a really long time. This is just taking that format digital. But look, I agree. I think there's some really interesting trends that we're starting to see. We're building out our decision maker platform and encouraging more interactivity between decision makers and constituents on the site. And I'd just say watch this space for some really exciting developments there over the next 12 months.
We talk about the digital divide, but no one ever talked about the print divide. No one ever talks about the advertising divide. It's the levelist playing field we've got in the sector, the world of digital. But I do agree, there are haves and have-nots.
I agree it's a concern, but what I would say is I actually think digital lends itself really well to small and nimble organisations. I get to work with a whole range of organisations, from the largest global non-profits to really small community organisations here in Australia, and often the ones that are most successful are the smallest ones, and the reason why is they are much more nimble. They don't have 30 people that need to sign off everything before it gets posted on social media, by which stage it's like completely irrelevant and no one cares anymore. So I think there's huge advantages there for smaller organisations, but I agree they actually need to get off the ground and get their foot in the door in the first place.
ALICIA, did you have?
No.
I might just make
Please.
one comment, actually. My advice, and it's probably just even running a startup, actually, in the digital space, we're constantly having to re-innovate ourselves because things are changing so fast. Like when we launched to when we are now, social media, video, every industry that we operate has changed. And my advice just in general is see what digital media works for you and be able to try and track it at least a little to see if it makes an impact. The campaigns that don't do so well are the ones that try to do everything in an average way. So when it comes to digital, I think test something for 3 months. At the end of it, you don't mind doing it. You feel like it's actually making a difference. Keep doing it. If you try something else for another 3 months and it's been painful to use, it's been hard in the organisation to adjust to, you're not getting much impact from it, just ditch it straight away, So my advice, just keep on testing. Test crowdfunding once. If it works for you, you get good impact. If you get some results, look at the funding. Okay, maybe the funding's not important. Have you got a marketing presence through social media? Has it activated social media for you? These kind of things as outcomes from each of the things. But test them 3-4 months. If they don't work for you, just ditch them. That's generally what we do. Like if we test a new feature, a new function, we invest in it. We don't invest a huge amount, enough to see if it get a result. If there's no result, just move on.
And that's a real startup attitude, isn't it? Minimal viable product, iterate.
Yeah.
Da-da. Madam. Alan, we've heard from your stealth marketer at Table 16. You better tell us, though, what was this campaign that worked so well? Just briefly, what was the campaign? How much did you set out to raise? What'd you get?
I finally get a project in the audience, yeah. and well done, actually. I think generally we have seen projects come back multiple times. over a period of years. But we generally see it's the same people that have kept their communities really engaged, like their supporters updated. And generally, I support quite a lot of these projects, so I see the people that are actually keeping that community together and actually involving them throughout the year as well. So we see it. I think the biggest benefit, I think, of crowdfunding is we push people to think very specifically about the project and the campaign so that you're really setting someone up to come back again, whether it's to take or extend the existing project of what they're trying to do, or else use it for a very different specific project. So generally, I think it can be used successfully over multiple times, but generally, if you're doing a very broad campaign, it does tend to get quite hard to come back to the same supporters again to reinvigorate a campaign for the same purpose. So, but I think we'll only see this probably in the next few years, how people do this. For the not-for-profits in the charity space, it probably is only about 18 months that people have really started to adopt this as a model.
Any closing remarks from our panellists? To inspire people to get off this electronic fence, cross the digital divide.
I'll jump in. All I would say is that, I'm very fortunate in that I get to see individuals using platforms like change.org every single day and having these amazing victories. But what excites me the most is that when they're coupled with the expertise and infrastructure and resources of the non-profit sector, it's even more powerful. So the kind of challenge, if you like, that I'd like to lay down to everyone in this room is to really think about how you can use digital, because it's happening and it's powerful and it will transform the world, but that will happen a lot more quickly if everyone in this room is actually engaging with it and using it as a tool to mobilise and amplify their impact. So if you don't know what you're doing or you don't know how to do it and you want to have a chat, I'm absolutely happy to have a chat, because I would love to see this sector getting the amazing stories and work that you do out there and winning the campaigns that are actually going to matter. So feel free to get in touch.
ALICIA.
I think that one of the, let me start again. I run a not-for-profit as well. It's hard work. I think one of the big opportunities for the not-for-profit sector is to engage with the for-profit businesses who are trying to work out a more ethical approach. And I think given that you guys have such strong ethical and social missions, that it's an opportunity for you to look at for-profit businesses and to procure from you. So this idea of social procurement, I think, has got legs. I think that's how the not-for-profit sector is going to increase its scale. And I also encourage you, as well as crowdfunding, to look at many different new styles of funding that are out there. And it all is based on your community and your following. So look after your people and they'll look after you.
I'll just say one thing, and it's generally across media. Just know your audience, know your own networks, and know the networks and audience that you want to attract. If it's new audiences, get to know them and actually use social media to have conversations, as much as being pretty much setting yourself up to be a media company and distributing content. Just have the conversations online. That's generally what works, and that's where you'll hopefully meet potential new supporters. So.
Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in thanking our four panellists, Jo Lim, ALICIA DARVALL, Anne Robinson and Alan Crabbe. Thank you for your questions. Thank you, microphone folk.